Welcome to the 4 o'clock work session on May 20th, 2014 for the Bowling Green Board of Commissioners. Today we get to talk about one of our favorite subjects, the city's annual budget. Mr. DeFebo has a presentation for us.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a pleasure to present for you today the 2015 City Manager's Budget Recommendation. As in the past, this will be a team effort. I'm going to provide for your consideration some broad themes. Jeff is going to present the revenue side of the budget. Katie will do the expenditure side. Michael has two jobs. He's going to talk about any personnel issues as well as any capital improvements. Then Katie will again come up to close. That'll be the itinerary for what we're going to follow today, hopefully. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the budget team. This is truly a pleasure for me to work with these people these past number of years. We've got to the point where we've developed this recommendation with some degree of flawlessness on our part, at least. Hopefully you'll find it the same. I'd like to acknowledge Katie Schaller, Jeff Meisel, Michael Grubbs, Aaron Ballou, and Wilma Brown, who helped work on it for the last many months. Also want to thank all the employee groups and the department heads and contract agency. Speaking of the department heads, we asked them to come today to give you courtesy and give the importance this document deserves by being here today, and they're all standing behind me with a few exceptions. The development of this budget was inspired by an old adage that I think we all know. That is simply to, if you want to understand what a man believes and values, find out where he spends his money. So we use that adage to drive this budget. Though our financial facts and problems have changed from year to year, we've been blessed by having what we believe to be a central mission statement, a central value statement. And I'd like to go over that. We believe it's our job here in city government, you included hopefully, to provide the best municipal services at the lowest appropriate cost, to help create jobs and economic opportunity for our citizens, and to improve the quality of life and the sense of community for all of our residents. That was what drove the development of this budget, and hopefully the job of every budget should be marrying what the values of the organization are against the actions in the budget. If you review our marriage over the last 8 years of our budgets, you'll notice some themes. You'll notice that I think this commission and ones before it have accomplished this vision. This is especially significant with respect to economic development and community development and job creation. The city plays a huge role in all three of these: economic development, job creation, and community development, but very rarely touts its accomplishments. I'd like to talk about some of those today. Since approximately 2006, the city has helped to create over 1,600 new jobs through its Job Development Incentive Program, or JDIP. We've provided over $5.3 million that we could have took into our public treasury and used this to incent businesses to create jobs here and provide opportunities for our residents. The city, along with the county, both pay approximately $1.3 million annually in support of the debt service at the Transpark. This allows the Chamber of Commerce to focus on job creation instead of paying the mortgage. The county and the city have together provided the money for the mortgage. We, the city, have provided $1 million to the ITA in debt service savings to help them with the future development of Transpark. We have to continue to expand and develop a Transpark to create jobs. As the Commission knows, we also spend approximately $125,000 a year through the Chamber to market our city in Warren County. This past year, we provided over $70,000 to the Chamber's new workforce coordinator position to help business match labor to open job vacancies. The city has issued a $25 million general obligation bond to build a new ballpark, as we all know. and we pay the annual mortgage payment of $1.6 million alone on that. We also provide a backstop to any shortfalls in the Hit-Sense Park Plaza development. There haven't been any, but we've agreed to backstop that. We've led in the creation, implementation, and success of the WKU Gateway to Downtown Tax Increment Financing Plan by providing over $500,000 in city revenues since its conception. Next year, in this coming budget, we expect to have to provide about $400,000 in support for the TIF. Taken as a whole, next year, we will spend approximately $3.5 million of direct tax money for economic development, job creation, or community and downtown development in Bowling Green. I think this is a record of achievement I think few cities can match of our size. Again, in the 2015 budget, we recommend the continuation of that $3.5 million of contribution for economic development, job creation in downtown. Our matching of money to values doesn't only apply to economic development and jobs. If you drill down into this budget over the past number of years, especially this year, you'll see that we have invested heavily in public safety, the development of the 800 megahertz radio system, development of new roadways in the community, the continued expansion of recreation in our community, the development of the sidewalk and stormwater programs have helped to create an infrastructure that we need. But what we spend our money on is only one half of the story. The other half is how we finance it, how we come up with the money to do those things for the people. That's, in my mind, those are equally important. It's noteworthy to know during this same period of time, we've been able to grow a more dynamic community without raising taxes, without depleting our reserves. For example, this year's budget has zero reserve money being used. It all comes from the stream of revenue. We haven't taken on any more operational debt. We've supported debt during this period for the development, community development, or economic development. And I think one of the Commission's greatest successes over this time period has been to reduce the pressure on our revenue stream by reducing the city's overall cost footprint. An example of that would be the more than $400,000 we've saved in the Gulf system over the last 2 years. And this reflects on less pressure. We hope to do the same with this budget recommendation before you. Hopefully, you will like what you have to hear. In this recommendation, you will find that we will be able to pay our bills. First priority is always pay your bills. Second, we do not recommend adding into any debt. There is no planned raising of taxes or requested raising of taxes in this budget. We do not, as I said, take any money from reserves. We've in fact created a greater exposure on some of our debt payments by adding to our rainy day fund for a number of those. And also, importantly, we've added new money for sidewalks, for paving, much needed capital equipment, and also one half of the payment for a new roadway in the community. We believe that this budget recommendation will allow you to continue the city's legacy of excellence in municipal services and progressive community building. I'd like to start to get to the recommendation by asking Jeff Meisel to come forward to give you an overview of our revenue picture.
Good afternoon. Happy Election Day to all of you. Hope it's going well. Let's see if I can figure out how to
Especially
use
me,
this.
Jeff.
I'm sorry, Bill, but I did not vote for you. So.
Probably didn't let it last time, did it?
All right. Most of my time, I'm going to touch on the all funds revenue budget, but won't spend a lot of time on it. It's in your books, but we went to $99,255,000 this year, going into 15, compared to the $95 million we had last year. That middle column is just the adjusted budget that we're in this year, and what most of that gets made up of is the carryovers we did at the beginning of the year from the prior year on projects that we're still working on, as well as grants we get in, as well as, in this case, we did a couple of bond refinancing, so those proceeds come into the adjusted budget as additional revenues, but it is what it is. And then Katie's going to talk about the expenditures later, but down below in that second half, we show the general fund revenue budget. We had a 53,582 budget adopted for 14. With the budget amendments thus far this year, we stand at about 53,851. This figure here, the 58,862,500, looks like a big jump. But this, for 15, we are pulling in the aquatics and golf programs into the general fund as a general fund parks program. This decision was made a year or so ago. We've talked about it with the enterprise funds. You couldn't always get a true comparison of how they were performing versus other parks programs, the subsidies that were occurring. And I will note, to date, this fiscal year, neither aquatics nor golf has had any general fund subsidy made to those programs thus far this year. We feel like we've got a good handle on golf now. We're producing monthly reports. This time last year, or this through, I think, April, I looked at it, this year, golf is $200,000 to the better compared to last year net. It's net income. Most of it's on the expenditure side and the savings we've been able to capture. We haven't had the greatest of weather thus far this spring and winter, but hopefully that'll improve. But the 58,862,500 does include golf and aquatics. That equates, as I'll show you in a second, to I think it's about a 9% increase, but without golf and aquatic, it's more like 5%. This slide here is, again, all funds, just a breakdown of your taxes. That would include your property taxes, insurance premium taxes mostly, and then you have your occupational fees of withholdings and nets. This is for all funds, so this is not only including general fund, but you have your Parks Improvement Fund, Parks Development Fund, and your Job Development Fund included in this number. And I'm going to break down the general fund here in a few minutes. Your licenses and permits is mostly your building, electrical, plan review. You've got your grants, got a lot of grants coming across all funds. That's your anywhere from your CDBG to your housing to your Section 8, all that's in there. Your fees include things like cemetery, I think is actually cemeteries and the charges for services. Fees would be anything including like your fees that you pay for alarm fees, all that under that umbrella. Parks and Rec, again, is your golf, aquatics, and all existing general fund programs. Your miscellaneous is interest, rental, anything like that across all funds. And then, as Kevin mentioned, we are planning no borrowing in FY15. This $1,100,000 is actually going to go away. That was what we had budgeted this year to borrow for the 800 radio system, but we've been able to find some savings there to cover that in cash. We are not going to borrow for the remaining portion of the 800 radio system to complete that, which should be up and running this fall. Transfers in is all the transfers in and out that happen between funds. We're going from a 13.6 to 14.8 this year. That can be explained with some additional capital transfers out that we're doing, mostly from the general fund, as you'll see throughout your budget, in the increases we've done with Katie and Michael mentioned the sidewalk program, the overlay, all that sort of stuff that happens with the transfers. This is your all funds breakdown of how the money comes in. As you'll notice, again, we're 43% occupational fees. That's net profits, withholding taxes, any transient fees that we collect from transients that come in and work for a few days. Taxes here includes property taxes and insurance premium taxes. Here's your transfers that occur between funds. Miscellaneous, again, is your interest earnings, rentals, sale of equipment, sale of real estate, all that kind of stuff that happens, grants, and so forth. On the general fund side, pretty similar. We go, though, to about a 69% reliability on the occupational fees. Taxes, again, is your property and insurance premiums, other related franchise, other miscellaneous taxes there make up about almost 23%. So between these two sources, 93% of your revenue on two sources. Next slide is, we've already talked about this, excluding the golf and aquatics. If you really compared FY14 apples to apples, we're really at about a 5.4% increase from adopted 14 to adopted or recommended for 15. Most of this, as I'll show you here in a few minutes, is coming from the occupational taxes and the property tax. Here's the kind of what we're seeing on a trend in FY11. Kind of was where we bottomed out on revenues. These are actual, or actually this is adopted, but actual was pretty close. We went from 49 and 10, 48 million, and then we started climbing back out of the trench there. I'm expecting 14, or this is 14 budget, but I'm expecting 14 actuals to come in around 56 million. And then we've got around a 56 million 5-ish budget going for FY15. So when you compare the 15 budget to where really we're going to end up in 14, it's not really that much growth. So when you got there's two comparisons going on all throughout these. Is you're comparing budget to budget, and you're comparing FY15 recommended budget to where we think we're going to finish 14. We think we're going to finish well above budget for 14. So here's another look at it in terms of total revenues is in the red, or the taller bars, and then this blue is occupational revenue. And I will point out, I did catch an error here. We somehow picked up just the withholding number only here. This does not include the net profits, so this number, this bar here, should really be somewhere right up in here, right above 40 million. So I apologize for that mistake, but all the rest of these are total occupational revenues that were collected during these years. And again, as you can see, FY07 was when we changed the rate from 2% to the 1.85. We hit a little bit of a dip, and then the recession kind of pulled us down a little bit, but we managed to kind of hold our own through that period. And then starting in FY11, FY12, we started climbing back up in the occupational fees. Okay, here's where we're going to kind of break down the categories. Property taxes did fairly well this year. We're around 3.5% growth this year. I think a lot of that may be coming from some new developments that put in play. There's been some apartment complexes built in the last year or so. The PVA keeps doing their annual reassessments on certain areas. So we're fortunate to grab the 3.5% for FY14. So we're going to meet budget there or go over budget. And then so this here is pretty conservative, about $1 million or about $183,000 growth there. I feel like we'll be able to capture that just in the natural growth of the assessments. This other taxes includes, as I mentioned, insurance premium taxes, bank franchise, telecommunications, the gas franchise tax. We're holding it pretty flat compared to where we think we're going to finish this year at the $2.5 million. Occupational fees. Just to clarify, this top number here is basically the 1.5% portion of the 185. We continue to track it separately so we can really judge over a long term how we're really doing on growth because of the tax rate changes that occurred in 2003 and the other changes that occurred in 2007. So long term, we want to be able to compare apples to apples, so we keep tracking those separately. So this number here would be your withholdings and your nets at the 1.5% rate, and then this figure here is your 0.35% money on your withholdings and nets for a total of $40,691,000 that we're projecting for total occupationals. This would include transient fees, penalties, and interest as well. So as you can see, we think we're going to finish if we finish the way we've been tracking this year, I think we're going to hit this number here pretty easily. So as you can see, not a whole lot of growth we're banking on for FY15. Most of the growth is already occurring this year, but we're anticipating we'll be able to sustain this current level in occupational fees. So that's kind of how we handled that projection. I will note, though, that the 3-year average growth in occupational fees is running about 4.5%. So that's pretty good. That's, as you can see on the graph, these last 3 or 4 years, we've seen that nice, consistent trend up in those revenues. So that's where we're getting this 4.5% average the last 3 years. License and permits, again, that's mainly your building permits, electrical, plan review. We're not projecting a whole lot of growth there, keeping that pretty minimal. Grants are real flat at 107 compared to 100,000. We really don't have that many grants remaining in general fund, just a few, like Bulletproof and some miscellaneous smaller ones like that. Charges for services, again, that includes cemetery, things like school tax collection fees, alarm permits, fireworks fees, all the miscellaneous fees, charges for services that we collect. That one is just a slight growth at $618,500. Not a lot to talk about there. Parks and Rec, we've already covered this one here, the difference being that it's aquatics and golf that are dumped in. Aquatics, though, if you break that out separately, aquatics we're actually projected, or we've lowered that budget down a little bit, 56,000 or about 9.9% on their operating revenues. We tweaked golf a little bit as well, turned it down just a little bit at 39,000 compared to last year's adopted. About 2.8%, just based on what we're seeing current year. Wanted to be conservative on that. So ends up, though, I think the general fund, other general fund parks programs, I think we budgeted slightly up on them. I can't remember the number, but they're maybe 8 or 9% growth we're projecting on those. Miscellaneous, again, things like interest earnings, rentals, sale of property, all that kind of stuff is in that line. Not a whole lot of growth there, either 396, 490, recommended for 15. And then the transfer in is your Heartland Development Area money that will continue to bring in and this year would be considered a transfer into general fund, being that Parks is all now completely under the general fund umbrella. This number here, though, consists of property taxes and occupational taxes in the Heartland area. Here's the general fund summary. As we've all talked about, this 9.8% looks pretty like a real hefty growth number, but when you really look behind the curtain, really feel like we'll finish at about a $58 million number in this current year. And if you really compare it to about a $58 million level, you're really looking at about 1.5% growth projected. So still overall fairly conservative budget that I'm comfortable with and can sleep at night with, and feel like that we can achieve and live within, and then hopefully continue on our current path. Do y'all want to ask questions now? Save them till the end.
Any questions for Mr. Meisel on that? Pearl, we'll get to a different part of the thing in just a minute, but we've got questions from the commission for Mr. Meisel before we go. Okay. Mr. Febo, or Ms. Schaller's up next.
Yes. He was supposed to introduce her.
Next up is Katie Schaller, which she'll cover the expenditure part of the budget. I apologize.
Okay, thanks.
Good afternoon. I will apologize for the error that we saw in the bar chart. That was my fault. We had several issues with PowerPoint. I was having to put some stuff in at the last minute, so that's entirely on me. I'm also not exactly sure why this keeps fluctuating in color. Maybe time for a new projector. Might have to add that to the budget or something. I don't know.
Since I'm
Anyway.
colorblind, it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah. Well, it's a little distracting, but anyway. Okay, I would like to go over the expenditure budget, and we're going to primarily focus on the general fund as we did with the revenue side. However, just a brief overview of all funds. If you'll note, as Jeff had mentioned, we do have our adjusted budget in there for FY14. It is significantly higher than our adopted budget for FY14. Primarily, that is due to all the capital projects that have been carried forward. It's also open POs, any purchase orders that we had at the end of fiscal year 13 that carried into 14. That basically accounts for the larger numbers that we have there on the expenditure side for the adjusted budget. And we've also had some budget amendments that applied some additional revenues and then some additional expenses with those revenues. If you look at the fiscal year 2015 recommended budget and the all funds, you'll see that we have about $788,000 that we're going to be using fund balance. Now, this is not general fund. This is all funds, so that primarily is going to be in our equipment replacement fund, our technology fund. We've got some police improvement purchases that we're going to do, and then also our health fund. So that's where that $788,000 is coming from. It is previously saved money that we've had set aside specifically for purchases or needs as we move forward into the future. As mentioned earlier with the general fund, the most significant change we've got is the addition of the aquatics and golf into the general fund. Again, that's why we went from $53.8 million to $58.8 million. And we are proposing to use $0 of fund balance in the general fund for next year. So we're proposing a balanced budget. Now, when we're looking at the all funds budget, there is a slight increase, just over $383,000 or 0.4% when you look at the FY15 recommended budget to the FY14 adopted budget. And primarily, that does come into play when we're looking at property and fixed assets, and then also in our supplies and subsidies and assistance accounts. The subsidies and assistance, the projection there is directly related to TIF activities as TIF activities grow, so does our contribution, our 80% growth that we turn over to the authority. So that's an expenditure that we apply into the budget. It's going to be about $400,000 in this next year is what we're projecting that number to be. And the decrease you note in contractual services from FY14 to 15 is specifically related to the capital project we had in FY14 for the radio replacement system. That was $3.3 million. We don't have that in FY15, so that line that has gone down in expense. The supplies, the increase related to the supplies account also directly relates back to capital projects that we have proposed for next year for police, parks, and the convention center. And then there's a $600,000 increase in subsidies and assistance, as I've mentioned. Primarily that's due to the TIF authority and some additional funds that we're going to propose to set aside for enhancing and transit services. And then in property and fixed assets, again, we're looking at some equipment replacement needs that we've deferred for the last several years. So that's the reason for that increase, which we'll talk about a little bit more when Mike comes up to talk about capital improvement. As you can see, public safety expenditures, they do make up nearly 28% of the all funds budget and over 41% of the general fund budget. Whereas the other 9 remaining departments that we have make up about 41% combined in the all funds and about 40% combined in the general fund. And of course, debt service, get that right. Debt service in the all funds is the next largest category, as is the transfers out. Now, in order to compare an apple to apple, that we wanted to give you excluding golf and aquatics so that you could see actually how our expenditures have grown from fiscal year 14 to 15. We are looking at a 4.6% increase, and that is primarily due to our capital improvement projects that we're proposing within the general fund operating budget. Again, we're not using any fund balance to purchase those capital projects or purchases. And as we did with the revenue, this is the adopted expenditure budget, and you can see the trend again where we had gone down in the FY11 budget during the recession and then our climb up. This basically matches almost exactly how the revenue budget has grown.
Katie, is that 2011, is that the bottom since the 2008?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, we started making cuts mid-year in fiscal year 8, 9, 10, 11, and then we had a few more in 12, but it was primarily 11 where we hit the bottom. And again, similar on the revenue side, we like to look at the personnel side because that is 60% of the general fund budget, the largest category of expense that we have, and compare that to the total expenditures. Now, when you see the revenue chart, and I don't have this, but you see the revenue chart compared to the expenditure chart, we want to see that occupational revenue be growing a little bit more than our personnel expenses, so that our personnel expenses are covered by the occupational fees that we collect. And you can also see that we have been able to, over time, basically personnel expenses have been relatively flat as we go across. We've been able to do that because we have held positions vacant, non-public safety positions vacant for a period of time. We've been able to combine certain jobs where it was possible. We've also taken some full-time positions and been able to make those part-time positions where it was appropriate. So we have cut quite a bit of our personnel costs, and we've also, obviously in, I think it was 2008, 9, and 10, we had some larger CERS rate increases in there, and we've been able to sustain those as well. Now I want to break out personnel, again, because it is the largest portion of our budget. And this particular slide does include the aquatics and the golf being added to the general fund, which is about $1 million. In addition, before we even add any wage adjustments, we've added $1 million to the general fund personnel just based on the aquatics program, bringing over about 68 part-time positions, and then another 38 part-time positions and 8 full-time positions from golf. Now again, as we want to look at how our personnel expenses have changed without considering aquatics and golf, because that is new this year, then you can see we have only a 2% increase overall in total personnel costs. Obviously, wages are at 2.8%. That is because we are proposing some personnel wage adjustments coming forward with a COLA and a STEP, which will be discussed a little bit later on. And we did experience a decrease this year in the CERS rates, which has helped to offset those increases. The other personnel cost line, that is our medical benefits line, includes medical, dental, vision, life, and our workers' compensation expenses. And then the total other benefits line includes our tuition reimbursements, as well as stipends for certain employees that are eligible that are using their personal cell phone for city business work, which is actually less expensive than getting them a city cell phone. Now again, as we go through the next few slides, you're going to see that we've provided some additional comparative information with aquatics and golf and without aquatics and golf. Again, we want to give you that opportunity to see how the general fund is truly growing in expense compared to the addition of aquatics and golf, because it's not just related to that. But it's also important to note that every time we go through this budget planning process, we really scrutinize expenditures. I know the department directors are in the room and they may want to say a few choice words about me as we go through the budget process, but we do want to look at how we spend historically. We want to look at those trends, and we want to make sure that we're budgeting appropriately and that we're not over budgeting or cushioning any of our expenditure accounts. We want to actually cover the costs that we have and do it in the best, most appropriate manner that we can do that. Now you'll see there is an increase in contractual services going into the next fiscal year. Again, excluding golf and aquatics. I'm probably going to focus more excluding golf and aquatics at this point, just so you can see that comparison. But we do anticipate some increases in utility costs, gas rates, water sewer rates are going up, electric rates are going up. And then we've also added the capital budget into that. So there's about 11.5% increase proposed next year in contractual services. We do actually have a 2% reduction in supply accounts for next year. And then we have a 39% increase in fixed assets, and that is directly related to a capital purchase for an emergency generator for City Hall for next year's budget. As we look at subsidies and assistance, I've already mentioned about the TIF distribution that does come out of our subsidy and assistance line. That accounts for the majority of that 12% increase. And if you do look, in this case I'm going to look at the recommended line with golf and aquatics. We do have a proposed increase in contingency of basically $25,000, and that is because we're taking in golf and aquatics into the general fund. We wanted to increase that contingency so we could cover those particular programs as we do all other general fund programs. As the year completes and we have other expenses that come up, having that contingency available is very helpful. Also, we do have, with the new radio system, in the transfers outline, there's about a $200,000 increase based on new fees that are proposed to be charged under the new system for the city's portion of those fees. And that is to do the ongoing maintenance, trying to set money aside, plan ahead for ongoing maintenance and eventual replacement of that system down the road. And then the other 2/3 of the increase that remains, again, related directly to capital projects, which would include sidewalks, stormwater, facility improvements, equipment replacement, and then half the cost of a road project that we have in the budget for Small House between Highland and Campbell Lane. Also included in that transfer outline is the debt expenditures that the general fund covers. And as we talk about debt, The general fund does cover about 43.5% of the debt expenses, which is around $5.5 million. And then we have special revenues, which are made up of our fire improvement fund and then our job development incentive fund. That's about $2.7 million. The only remaining enterprise fund is the Convention Center Corporation. There's about $800,000 of debt still there. And then we do get reimbursements of about 30% of our debt costs from WKU and Warren County. It amounts to about $3.7 million. Here you can see 9.4% of the general fund expenditures for FY15 is dedicated toward the payment of previously approved debt expenditures or debt obligations. And then the debt service for FY15 is expected to be less next year because of the refinancing of the 2002, 2004, and 2007 GO bonds that we've done in the last few years. We're finally starting to reap some of those benefits. And with all the existing debt that we currently have on hand and paid for in the general fund, we're projecting that to be paid off by 2034. So at this point, we aren't projecting any additional debt in the general fund beyond 2034. We have to set aside, according to our policy, 20% of our projected revenue budget goes toward our committed fund balance. And that amounts to about $11.8 million. The difference between where we end FY14 to where we take that dollar value out and the fact that we're not proposing any use of assigned fund balance into next year's budget, we're projecting about $4.5 million of unassigned fund balance. That is money that you would have available through the year if there are any significant purchases that come forward, whether it's a land acquisition, whether it's an infrastructure repair, we have a major road issue that needs to be dealt with, or there's a significant weather event and we need to come up with funds quickly to cover expenditure costs with that. That $4.5 million is immediately available for those types of things, and we don't have to touch our rainy day fund of the 20% if we don't have to. Again, as we kind of summarize the comparison of the general fund expenditures with the inclusion of golf and aquatics and then also excluding golf and aquatics, you can see basically the difference there. Golf and aquatics account for about half of the increase that is in the total general fund expenditure budget for next year. And this basically shows you how our expenditures are divided among all the various types of purchasing that we do. Again, personnel being the largest portion of the budget at 38.1% of all funds and 59.6%, almost 60% of the general fund. And now I'd like to turn it over to our Human Resources and Risk Management Director, Mike Grubbs, and he's going to go over with you our recommendations for the personnel and then also our capital improvement program.
Thank you, Katie, and good afternoon, Commissioners and Mayor. Get the opportunity to provide more of a drill down on probably our two largest expenditure categories, obviously personnel as well as our capital. Personnel, as Katie said, is 60% of our general fund expenditure, and this is to present our recommendations to you on wages, pay increases, classification, and also workforce complement. The recommendations in our FY15 budget for general fund is an impact of an increase of about $1.1 million. This is for raises for full-time, part-time, and seasonal employees, benefits, new positions, upgrades. Our policy has been to try to match at least what the increase in the consumer price index is every year using the last calendar year. The Department of Local Government is the one that issues the official number for the state, This past year, the CPI went up by 1.5%. Just to give you a comparison, the previous 2 years, it was 1.7% in 2012 and just under 3% in 2011. Because of the economic downturn that we had in fiscal years 10 and 11, as you've seen from previous slides with revenues and expenditures, we weren't able to give the normal expected pay increase to employees in those years. So thus, we've actually this year proposed to give a cost of living increase of 2% rather than the 1.5% issued by the Department of Local Government. Again, because revenues are coming in a little better, we've been able to control our costs. We've been able to keep the number of personnel at a consistent or even a lower level, expected employees to do more with less. We feel comfortable in being able to make this recommendation to actually give a slightly larger raise than perhaps we would have normally. The 2% increase is proposed for all full-time employees. We would actually adjust the pay schedules by that amount. In addition to the COLA, we have a merit step plan that we originally adopted in 2006. It was implemented in fiscal years 2008 and 9, but as I mentioned, we then deferred it for the next 2 years. When we brought it back in 2012, we went to a half step. Rather than having a step increase every other year that cost us a lot of money, we went to a half step, so that evens out our costs each year. The amount of increase that an employee will get will depend on where they are in their pay grade, whether they were promoted or hired during the year, of course, whether they had satisfactory performance or not. We also have different pay schedules, so it's different for each pay group. But overall, the step amounts to about a 1.28% average increase. For an employee who's been here a year and who's at the beginning of their pay grade, it's going to be a higher amount. For an employee who's at the top of their pay grade, it's going to be a lower percentage, obviously, since it's a flat dollar amount for that grade. And we estimate the impact on the budget to be about 1.1%. So if you add the 2% COLA plus the 1.1 average step, we're looking at a 3.1% average increase for full-time employees. For police and fire, an entry-level police or firefighter that's been here for a year, the step is about 1.6%, so it is a little bit higher for those personnel. And again, feel free to stop me if you have any questions.
Mike,
Sir.
who and where do we take our wage surveys from? In other words, I am sure there are certain documents that you look out that are published on a yearly basis. What other steps do we take wage survey-wise to make sure that our employees' hourly salaries are in line with comparable?
We participate in the Kentucky League of Cities wage survey that they do every year. We also participate in a private survey called CompData. We actually pay, I guess, as a membership to be in that and then to get the results. Of course, we have not done an official pay study in a number of years, which is where one would use that information most likely. But we do participate in a couple of studies each year as well as others. Some other cities may do a survey that we also participate in and then get the results from.
You said we haven't done one in years?
No, we've not done a wage study. I guess 2003 was the last official study, and then we also did a follow-up study in 2005. If you recall, Ken Thompson, when he was here, we had someone else come in and do some study. But we've not done a full study in 10 years.
I wasn't here, of course, when Ken Thompson was here. Are we due one?
Yes, we've talked about it. It's the problem is you raise a lot of expectations when you do a study, and then obviously you have to be able to implement it. And that was a problem we ran into last time we had a study, that then we ran into issues with implementation. So, but you're right, we are due for one again. It's just a matter of having the wherewithal financially and emotionally to adopt it and to follow through with it.
Well, and I'm not trying to be a smart aleck in any kind of way, because I'm not, but requesting a survey and the implementation, I should turn it around, during a survey and requesting a survey is different than the implementation. Am I right?
True, but I think if we go out, I would hope if we go out with the intention of doing a survey and a study that we have some intention of adopting the results of it. And that's a problem. You never know till you get the results what it's going to tell you, whether you can afford it or not. But I think certainly if that's something that's the Commission's will, we can certainly discuss that at your fall retreat.
Well, I have not in any way discussed it with my colleagues, but when I was in the industry, we completed a wage survey ever so often. One of the areas was the Kentucky League of Cities, as well as local wages and other companies, similar one.
I guess since none of you were on the 2004 Commission, we adopted the MEG study in 2003, and the next Commission did not believe the results of that study, and therefore we did not implement it. So, I guess I can say that since none of you were on that Commission.
2004?
Right.
And Thompson was here?
He was here the following year, but it started prior to that. When he came, he then brought in an outside consultant to help review the study that was done, and he provided some additional information. And I wasn't in HR at that time, but I don't think anything was adopted regarding that follow-up either.
Well, I definitely wasn't here, so I don't know. Well,
You may want to look at that in our fall retreat, Joe.
yeah, I really do. I think it's something that we have a responsibility to look at because we don't want our people leaving for better jobs because they're making better pay. And I just think it's our responsibility to find out what that pay is that they might be leaving for. We should maybe already been up to date on that possibilities. You know, I'm not trying to create a problem. I'm just trying to say that I want our people to be on the same playing field as others as close as possible.
It's an issue we have discussed at the staff level the last couple of years. So I think we welcome the opportunity to talk to you all further about it.
Okay. Fair and equitable.
Moving on to part-time and seasonal employees, the 2% COLA for them will average a 20-cent an hour increase. We'll also increase the minimum and maximum pay rates in their grades for that. Just to make sure the public is aware, though, due to KRS statute, the elected officials are going to be limited to a 1.5% increase. Also, we're recommending an additional 20-cent an hour increase for our lower pay grades in the part-time seasonal category, where they start at less than $11 an hour. As you all are aware, both the state and the national government proposed minimum wage increases over a 3-year period that would take it to $10.10 an hour. The first increase we would be okay with. We fit that, but if it goes to 9-something and then $10.10 an hour, we have a lot of employees making less than that, and with compression, it could cost us over $300,000 a year if the minimum wage is increased. So what we're doing this year with your approval is to go ahead and give an additional 20 cents an hour for the grades that start less than 11. First of all, it helps us competitively in hiring parks attendants and lifeguards and laborers and such. But also if there is a minimum wage increase next year or the year after, we've moved a little bit along in trying to cover that so we don't have such a big apple to bite later on. Just like full-time employees, if a part-time employee has been here a year with satisfactory service and they're still below the maximum of their pay grade, they would get a 10-cent increase as well. So it's possible some part-time employees will get a 50-cent an hour raise in the budget if approved. We do have a handful of position upgrades in the budget. An upgrade is where a job classification or pay grade is changed, either due to increased responsibility, the person is working outside of their current level. Internal equity, where you have two people basically doing the same level of work, but one is a different grade of the other, or there's been a change in the organizational structure and or supervisory responsibility. There are six positions recommended.
What was that?
They're all one sex of the other. But anyway, there's 6 of them recommended, including 1 part-time employee. Hey, at least I wore a nice shirt.
I didn't go with
and
You all right in my book.
I know,
Don't-
you all were passing
don't-
notes.
don't pay no attention to
Melinda was
some of these
passing
others.
notes, I saw. And none of them are upper management positions. And they are listed in your budget book, the specific positions and what pay grade they're presently allocated to and where they would go. Okay, moving on. Oops.
But can I ask a question? You may be covering it
Sure.
a little bit later. In the book that you've indicated, the number of positions, are you going to cover that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
By department?
It's not by department, but the number of positions we're adding and deleting. And then we have a total for the whole workforce. But in your budget book, you have a list by department of how many positions there are, but we're not going over that right now. A couple of charts for you showing personnel expenditures, all funds. Obviously, police and fire total together a little over around 60% for all funds. Parks and Recreation 13%, Public Works 9%, and then the other departments are about 15%, and then you've got the Police Fire Pension Fund. General Fund, again, police and fire each at 31% each, Parks and Recreation just under 15%. Public Works at 8%, and the rest of city government at 15%. As Katie mentioned, we've got some good news regarding CERS. After several years of increases, we've had the second consecutive year now where rates have actually dropped. This is a little hard to read, but our rates next year for non-hazardous are 17.67, and for hazardous is 34.31%. Those are reductions of 6.5% and almost 4% respectively. Then got there the high years for you. The high year for fiscal year 13, you can see, was 19.5% for non-hazardous and 37.5% for hazardous. Look back 10 years ago and see what we were paying even 10 years ago. We're now paying 17.6% for non-haz compared to 11% 10 years ago. Hazardous, we're paying 34.33% versus 25%. So again, even though we've got 2 years of reductions, we're still paying quite a bit more for retirement. Of course, the last General Assembly passed pension reform, which has significantly benefited the program in the long run, but it also impacts employees that are joining the retirements for the first time this year. Their benefit package will be significantly less than people hired prior to that time. Obviously, we're in the same boat as any other city in the state, but it can affect us competitively in maybe seeking people who, in the past, maybe they thought, well, city government doesn't pay as well, but the benefits are really great, the retirement's really great. Well, now the retirement program is going to be much closer to what you find in the private sector. And obviously, there's a lot of criticism about public sector retirement programs. But again, that will affect us somewhat in competition in the future when we're trying to bring people into the workforce. Look back, even with the lower retirement costs, the fringe benefit cost for us to hire a new police officer or firefighter is still 58% when you add medical insurance, dental, and all the other benefits. So for every $10,000 we pay, say for a new officer, we're also paying an extra $5,800 in benefits. So we have to look at the total cost when we're hiring people. Medical plan, obviously a major part of our benefit package. As you may recall, in 2009, the city made several plan design changes that helped to stabilize our costs. That's borne out by the fact that in fiscal year 2008, our total cost of our medical, of all of our health plans was $4.3 million, and 4 years later, it was less than that. Now this past year, we did have a spike to $4.9 million. We've had some really large claims, and as a result, our insurance for excess claims went up. However, our trend currently for this fiscal year is we don't see much of any increase over last year. So hopefully we may have evened out. We have budgeted a 9.7% increase in the budget for next year when you compare it to the estimate that we're expecting to have for this year. The actual budget's only up 1%. But when I compare it to what our actual is, it's more like a 9.7%. At the present time, we're not recommending any actual plan design changes. We are discussing the possibility of some changes in employee premiums that will go into effect in January. We have not raised premiums since 2009. As you're aware, we're looking at other ways to try to save money, one of which being the possibility of an on-site clinic. So just to let you know that we are continuing to monitor this fund very closely. We did have $4.3 million in the trust fund at the beginning of the fiscal year, and obviously that's available to help us with any shortfalls in one year. Our insurance consultants paid for an actuarial study this last year. They said at most we needed to have $3 million on hand, so we're still well above that as far as where the trust fund sits. Back to kind of the general question about our workforce. In 2008, we had our high when you add all full, part-time, and seasonal employees. We were at 759. The proposed budget is 728 employees, which is a decline of 4.1% since 2008. You might notice a slight decrease there. The first line that's blue for most of us is police and fire. The second line, the darker line, is all other full-time. And the third line, that's typically the highest, is part-time seasonal. If you notice the first line, the blue line, police fire, seems to have dropped a little bit from this year to next. That is because there are 3 civilians that are either moving or have moved from police to either NCS, the 2 animal control officers, or the crime analysts that moved to GIS. It's not that we've cut police officers or firefighters, it's just that we've moved some personnel from one department to another. Some reference to additional positions. We are recommending 4 additional positions in the new budget. One is a labor and operations. As you're aware, we're taking on the mowing of the Scottsville Road corridor, so that is to help Public Works with that. We're proposing the addition of an office associate in Parks Maintenance where they've never had a city employee. They've had some people through other hiring services, but not paid by the city. This position was recommended as a result of some issues in an internal audit. Also, they're in the process of implementing a new work order system. Plus, as I'll reference, and as you know, we combined 2 management positions earlier this year when our Parks Maintenance Division manager retired. The golf superintendent took a combined job, and so now handling 2 divisions, we felt that he needed some support in order to do that. We are recommending the addition of a grants coordinator position. We previously had a grants manager position at a higher pay grade. That position was eliminated in 2011, and the NCS director has been covering those duties since that time. So we're recommending a coordinator slot who will be responsible for handling all grants for the city. And also a part-time office assistant in Public Works Administration. They used to have 2 full-time office people there. Back during the recession, they lost one of the people. And so this is to give them back some part-time help.
This still keeps us at the total of 728.
Yes.
When you say all grants for the city, doesn't include the police grant writer, does it?
Yes. We did have 7 positions eliminated during this current fiscal year, which is again why our number went down. 3 full-time positions were eliminated. 1 in accounting, as I mentioned, the parks maintenance position, and also the golf pro at our 2 9-hole courses. And we also eliminated 4 part-time positions in parks. In review.
Can you go back to that last slide? There you go. That last statement.
Yeah, the last statement. With the recommendation of the 4 new positions, we're still reducing the overall complement. I'm not used to these fancy things. In review, Again, recommending a 2% COLA for all full-time employees plus the merit, 20% hour for part-time employees plus 10 cents if they're eligible, and the additional 20 for those that are in the lower grades. Just to let you know, the additional cost for that 0.5% COLA and the additional 20 cents for the lower grades and part-time is going to cost us around $188,000 in wages and benefits. So that's kind of the additional impact of that add-on. Again, some rate relief with CERS. We're not proposing any changes to employee benefits other than one improvement. In 2010, we altered the Education Assistance Program to severely limit the eligibility to get a master's degree. We also implemented a dollar amount each year that we would reimburse. We're recommending that we go back to the old policy that will allow a master's degree as long as it's job-related. City manager has to approve it. And again, we still have a dollar limit on how much we'll provide. Any questions right now on personnel before I move into capital? All right, our capital improvement program. This is a multi-year summary for you that gives you the total, how much was debt, how much was general fund, and then debt as a percentage of the CIP. While our total CIP for this year, next year is going to be somewhat less than last, you can also see that our debt is down and that the amount in the general fund is going up. In fact, look at our sad year in 2010 when we had $0 from the general fund in capital, and now we're looking at almost $4 million next year. That's how much of an improvement in revenues that we've had since that time. And of course, debt as a percentage of CIP is now going to be around 63%. We use this chart to try to help reflect strategic goals that have been established by the City Commission. Improve traffic flow, we plan to spend over $2.5 million. Community livability, over $2.4 million. Then for municipal facilities and equipment, almost $1.9 million. And finally, our technology improvements, over $700,000. First, talking about community livability, sidewalks. As Katie mentioned, we are proposing to put more money into the sidewalks this coming year. We started this program in fiscal year 2008. We did have to discontinue it a year or two during the recession, but started it back a couple of years later. This proposal this coming year for $650,000 is an increase of $250,000 over this past year. And Commissioner Hill was instrumental in encouraging us to increase the budget for that this year. When we started this in fiscal year 2008, we have completed over 8 miles of sidewalks, with more coming this year. And obviously, we also put in $100,000 to reconstruct existing sidewalks. And all of that $650,000 is local tax revenue. None of that is state money. The $100,000 for reconstruction is state money. Stormwater mitigation, we started this program again after the May 2010 flood. We've allocated over $2 million since then for stormwater mitigation and plan to use $500,000 of local tax dollars to address priority projects in the next year. Parks and recreation. First of all, relocating the West End Park. As you're aware, we had a lease with the Higgins property that ended, so we've had to purchase property and plan to move the playground and park to a nearby location. They'll have swings, tables, benches, a water fountain, and fence. We plan to spend $85,000. We budgeted almost $400,000 for a new soccer field at the West End. We have 2 locations that we're looking at. That cost will include dirt, irrigation, water, electric, lighting, and parking. We plan to build or reconstruct an existing building to provide a shelter and restroom at Hobson Grove, and also a playground for a total cost of $135,000. The shelter will be similar to the one at H.P. Thomas, and the playground will be similar to the one at Roland Bland Park. The tennis complex at Kiriakis needs to be resurfaced. We reconstructed that whole project in 2008, but it needs to be resurfaced every 5 to 7 years. We've already run water line, but we plan to also install a water fountain there, plus replace the windscreens. And the Hobson House, Riverview, the city actually owns that facility, and so we're responsible for major capital. They've had some water damage, and so we need to do some work to waterproof, also to do some interior and exterior painting, and to replace some wooden doors. A whole new focus for us is our reinvestment local strategy area through the NCS department. We plan to take $300,000 of the CDBG money plus $200,000 of city funds to invest in the tract of the city west of the bypass. We'll have priority needs developed in each area, and we'll tailor it to the community need. We'll take an area at a time and determine what those needs are, but it could be sidewalks, small parks, stormwater improvements. There could be some acquisition or demolition, and we might also do some housing improvements. Improved traffic flow, $2.5 million. The street resurfacing program, budgeted this new year at $1.2 million. That's an increase of $300,000 from last year. For the first time in a long time, we plan to put in $200,000 of local dollars toward that project, and we believe we'll be able to resurface around about 5.5 miles of roadway, again, depending on the roadway conditions and what else we have to do regarding curb and gutter. As Katie mentioned, as the city manager mentioned, we have the issue of Small House Road. Widening the entire road is very, very expensive, something probably beyond our capability without significant debt. But Public Works has recommended a midterm project that can have a lot of benefit, and that is to widen it from Highland Way to Campbell Lane to have a left turn lane all the way, improve curb and guttering, and also take care of drainage. The total project is $2.1 million at this point, and what we're proposing to do is budget half of it this year and half next year. And again, this is using local tax dollars. We're not using any fund balance to cover this project. Other road improvements, McClellan Road, out next to the Greystone subdivision at the southern part of the city, budgeting $150,000 to widen the road from Nashville Road to Gray Rock, and also address some drainage issues, plus overlay the entire length of McClellan. At the South Central Kentucky Industrial Park, I plan to spend $100,000 on road and signage improvements to take care of some safety issues and also to improve circulation there. The McClellan Road project, we've already started some preliminary work there. Technology improvements, $713,000 budgeted. Our top priority IT-wise this year is to replace the mobile data terminals or computers in 110 police cars. Those were purchased originally with federal grant money, but now comes the time to replace them as they're becoming obsolete and hard to repair. In-car cameras, $110,000. The system has become defunct. What the police department plans to do is replace them over 3 years. So $110,000 will cover 20 cameras this year. Also, as we purchase new police cars, they'll automatically be installed in those cars. And then taser replacement. Tasers we should probably replace every 5 years. We're now approaching 8 years, but we plan to replace them over a 3-year period at $30,000 a year. The fire department wants to implement a mobile public education center that they can use to provide customized prevention education. This can be anything from emergency preparedness to fire extinguisher safety. They can also have child-specific training, senior citizen-specific training. They hope to apply for a grant or to get grant funds for this, but in the event they're not successful, there are funds in the fire improvement program to fund this. And then what's called BOLT, which is the business occupational license property tax system software. This is an old software that actually goes back to the old KVS days from the 90s. We've never had software that's truly compatible with our current financial software, so we hope to either locate or develop software that will be compatible with the New World logo system. Facilities and equipment, $1.9 million. And facilities and equipment replacement is 1.2 of that. Plan to replace 12 police cars for $444,000. Each car is around $25,000, but then you have to add another $12,000 to outfit and equip the car, including the in-car camera. Public Works, 10 pieces of equipment totaling over $500,000. That includes 2 leaf trucks, 2 leaf machines, as well as various trucks. 4 trucks in Parks and Rec, and 3 vehicles total in Fire and NCS for inspection vehicles. Other equipment, Convention Center Fund, $140,000 for some projects there. We have 19 bleachers in Parks and Recreation that we need to replace for safety reasons. A diesel generator for City Hall, and to replace the golf carts at Riverview. You may recall that we replaced the carts at the other 2 courses, and the better carts went to Riverview. This budget now proposes to replace 36 carts at Riverview, most of which are over 12 years old. Then we have several facility improvements. There's been a safety recommendation for several years to install a sprinkler system here in this building. Fleet Management has leaks in their roof, and so we would repair it and also replace the roof at the Public Administration building next door. The operations parking lot would have a concrete pad that will help with heavy equipment they have there, and then also we'll do work at the Convention Center. In summary, as you've been told several times, we're not using any fund balance this coming year. Shows you what we did the last 2 years in using fund balance for capital. Again, no new debt. 29% of the debt's covered by other entities. The general fund has a debt payment of $5.5 million, which includes $1.6 million for the ballpark and $1.1 million for the ITA. One thing I wanted to point out that I appreciate what the city is doing, even though it doesn't benefit my department directly, is that we have put off replacement of equipment for some time. Just have not had the money to do it. And I went back and looked through some last budgets. Some of this was confusing for me when I even wrote it, so bear with me. But the 3-year period from 2010 to 12, 3-year period, we only budgeted $250,000 for equipment replacement, excluding fire trucks. For the 6-year period of 2009 to 14, for Public Works and Parks, we invested $500,000. This new budget, we're proposing $662,000 for those 2 departments, which is more than we did in 6 years. We've got a lot of aging equipment in those 2 departments, and this budget does an awful lot to help those 2 out in helping to keep our fleet running. Again, just in review, we think that this budget continues the priority community impacts that have been established in recent years. It also allows us to replace equipment, improve our facilities, and enhance our technology. Now we'll go back to Katie to talk to you, unless you have any questions or want me to talk about the sexes.
Any comments or questions from Mr. Grubbs?
Good job.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I return to talk about agency funding. We are not proposing any specific increases in agency funding for this next year. We are looking at the inmate mowing program having gone away in October of this past year and taking on some additional expenditures from that service in-house. Public Works and Parks will both be taking on Scottsville Road and Cemetery Road, trying to keep those rights of way cleaned up and mowed. And then we'll be putting some additional funds into maintaining Louisville Road as we partner with the county and Operation Pride with that area. And you can see that in the past several years, we have made a concerted effort to reduce the reliability or dependency of agencies on the city for funding. And since FY 2003, we've basically remained around about $1.25 million for funding. This reflects our recommendations as we go into the next budget. You can see again the elimination of the inmate mowing program, and with that, $34,000 removed, it's about a 2.75% decrease, and we're looking at the FY14 adopted column and the FY15 recommended column. Now, obviously, there are a couple agencies that did request some increases. We have not proposed to include those in our budget at this time. That would be a discussion for the board to have. The increases that are proposed are the Welfare Center, Public Transit, and Human Rights Commission. It amounts to about $15,221 more dollars if you wanted to address any of those. Just another note is by a municipal order in 2008-30, the Welfare Center also receives additional funding through excess gas franchise fees that we collect over $200,000. Now, they received a payment in 2010 from that, and then also this year again, FY14, they're receiving about $15,361 more dollars to this total we've got here of the $29,240. They're getting an additional $15,000 before the end of this fiscal year is over because of the increase in the gas franchise fees, primarily due to the winter that we suffered through this year with the colder weather. That would potentially continue as that municipal order stands from 2008. So next year, again, if there are any excess funding from our gas franchise that we collect over $200,000, that would also be dedicated to the Welfare Center. And it specifically goes toward assistance to individuals that are in need for their utility costs, heating, and different things like that. It is not an administrative expense for the Welfare Center. It does actually go back to benefit the community. I'm going to move past this slide for just a second.
Okay.
Yes.
The $80,000 we're proposing for transportation, does that go into this budget or somewhere else?
It will go into this budget. That's on the next slide. We have not actually identified that increase in this line item at this point. Again, that's a discussion to have. But if you'll note, we do have an additional $100,000, a little over $100,000 recommended that goes along with agency funding, where the city is going to provide, set aside additional funds, about $10,000 for the airport. Their original request was for about $50,000 to go toward any grant matches for airport improvement projects that they have. Now, this year's budget, we had over $40,000, none of which has been spent yet. So what we're proposing is that we would carry that money forward into next year and add the $10,000, so they actually will have the $50,889 in next year's budget. It just isn't going to be a total brand new figure for next year.
And won't be pulled unless the grants are approved.
Pardon me?
And won't be allocated unless the grants are approved.
Correct. Correct. It would not be allocated. And the city has a portion of that share. I think it's like 1.25% that the city would have to match for any grants that they get either through the FAA or other federal agencies. We also have a policy that was established back in 2005 where the city matches dollar for dollar to United Way what an employee pledge is for that year. So we had about $12,065 in employee pledges to United Way, so the city is going to match that amount going into fiscal year 15. And then again, here, as Mr. DeFebo mentioned, we are proposing $80,000 based on the discussion that was had just a few weeks ago at the work session, a couple weeks ago, for improvements to public transit. This is one of the goals that you've added to the strategic plan this last year. We have not identified what that would be used for. That is the board's decision, but it is based on the discussion that took place at the work session. So it could go toward some one-time costs, or it could go toward ongoing improvements to the frequency of the route distribution. I think the $80,000 was presented as half equivalent of a full-time route increase. Again, that's up to the board to decide how you want that spent, but the money has been set aside in the budget. We would probably increase the community action public transit line by that amount. As we move forward into next year, you'd see that increase going in to their budget. But in all, basically agency funding, including this additional $100,000, represents 2.3% of the general fund expenditure budget. Any questions? Any discussion that you would like to have about agency funding at this point?
Yes, ma'am.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for adjusting those numbers. I appreciate all of the agencies submitting these reports, but when reviewing these, my concern is that some of these agencies are requesting funding from the city, and listed in the report, their employees are going to receive a higher increase than our own city employees. And as a commissioner, I have a hard time giving up city funds to an agency that will be receiving more money, not saying they don't deserve it, but looking at what our city employees are going to receive as a pay increase and then looking at these agencies, I have a hard time supporting them receiving a higher pay increase than our own employees.
Are you proposing that the budgets that were submitted be reduced by the amount of the percentage in order to match what the city employees are receiving?
That would be fine with me, but they've also, by doing this, these have been lowered. These agencies are not receiving what they requested because they've requested a certain amount, but they are recommending a lower amount, so I applaud them for doing that.
Oh, I misunderstood.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
yes, no.
It's already been deducted, you're
Yes,
saying?
I
Okay,
applaud you for doing that. And we take a strong look at it when some of these agencies are receiving huge bonuses for their employees. And I don't know that any of our employees get large bonuses like that. And I know ours have not had a pay increase.
We don't
like
get
that.
bonuses at all.
Okay, so
And I will note, I believe there was a typo on the airport
oh, phew, okay.
board
Then
application on
okay.
that had an extra zero it should not have had. That was a typo.
An
I think it
extra
was an
had
extra zero.
Yeah, 10,000. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, good.
One too many zeros on that figure?
I think, yes.
Could you
It
double
was.
check on that for us?
Yes, if you'll verify, that
I
would be.
will.
But that
I'm
did
almost certain
concern
of
me.
that. I don't think Rob is here, but I am almost certain that that was a typo.
Okay.
So it's actually the same bonus he's received every year
Yes.
versus an additional 10,000?
Yes, I will confirm that, but I believe that's the case.
Okay. But I do thank you for lowering these. I will not support anything if these agencies are going to receive a higher pay increase than our own city employees. So thank you.
So you're comfortable with the recommendation at this point? No changes proposed? No decreases to anything other than, but also no increases? Is that what I'm understanding?
Is that what I'm hearing? Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion about agency funding at this point? Okay.
All right, thanks.
All right. So with that, we come to the end of our presentation. I would like to thank Laura Harris for her creative design and graphic theme that she applied to our budget document this year in our budget presentation. Every year we recruit her to help us with a theme, and she has put this together. It's been difficult to see, I'm sure, but the pictures up here are actually city pictures. This is the old Louisville Road Bridge. We have right in front of City Hall, I believe this is from the late 1800s, early 1900s, the police department picture. We also have a picture of the downtown. I want to say the Capitol, the side where the Cap Main Street. So it's kind of a view down Main Street. And then we have the old fire department headquarters, which was located right here behind City Hall. We've got a picture of that, and I think there's a horse-drawn team standing in front of that picture, the way we used to do before we had trucks and automotive equipment. I would also like to thank Erin Ballou. She is not here today. She's attending a conference and out of town, but she helped considerably to get this budget presentation, the budget document together. Made my life so much easier. Thank you very much. And we'd also like to thank Sean Weeks. He also provided assistance to Jeff as we did the revenue projections and helped with that. So again, we'd like to thank everyone involved. The budget team is here to stand ready to answer any questions that you may have or any additional questions. We're also here to listen to any comments you'd like to provide at this point.
Great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on a couple things. The book here that you've identified as a summary book, I've been reading these for years, and this is the best read. If anybody wants to understand what's going on in city
We made a
government, this
purposeful
summary,
effort to eliminate half the verbiage.
this was great, straight to the point, all the data. But now I hope everybody understands that every dollar that you spend is in this other one.
That's correct.
And there's a few of us that go through every page. So
I did too, Mayor.
we talked about that, didn't we, Joe?
Yeah, we talked about that. I went through every page of it.
No, and I want to applaud. I mean, the most important thing we do from city government is the wise expenditure of tax dollars. And you've taken the comments that us as a commission has provided and put those values into place. You know, I want to applaud you on, you know, living within your means, reducing debt, holding the line on employees. In fact, even reducing them, 20, 30 people over the past 5 years. And the biggest kicker is I don't think people have noticed any reduction in services. So it goes beyond you to all the staff. I think I mentioned that when you had your
The
department
employees
head
have
retreat.
worked harder too.
This is a great place. It's just an absolutely great place, and thank y'all for your hard work.
I think it was 2010. Of course, that was a year that we weren't proposing any capital projects, that we didn't actually use fund balance. So this is the first time in a while we've been able to present you a balanced budget without using previously saved money. So we're very excited about that.
Comments from anyone else? Questions?
I think you summed it up very well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Great job.
Already then?
Great job.
Okay.
You want to do your evaluation today?
If you
This
want
be a
to.
great day.
Just picking on you. Thank you. I'm sorry.
All right, just the last few comments. Since you are comfortable with the recommendations that we have made to you, we will go ahead and finalize our budget document. We will officially apply the wage adjustments into the system. So there might be a slight fluctuation in totals when we present you the final budget ordinance, but we will get that together, have that ready for our first meeting in June, which is June 3rd. So you can have first reading of the budget at that point, second reading at the second meeting of June, and no special call.
Amen.
Yes, good. We will also present some additional documents for your consideration. The pay schedules would be brought forward for first reading at the first meeting in June, and then we'd have agency appropriation agreements, and the final agency funding approval will be done at the second meeting in June. So if you have any questions or if you want to have any additional information about that process, just let us know. If you have any other questions that come up between now and the next 2 weeks before we do first reading, please let us know that as well. We'll do our very best to answer those questions for you.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you again so much. We really appreciate it. And
Thank you.
we'll return at 7 o'clock for our regular meeting. Thank you for tuning in.